Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Santita Jackson Show on AM 950 Radio, the voice of progressive Minnesota. It's a joy to be with you today. So much is going on. We're monitoring the student protest. We're monitoring the provocateurs who are showing up at the protest. We're monitoring Columbia University, these protesters, demonstrators who are demonstrating uh, their protest for injustice overseas in the Middle East. Well, they have been given a deadline to either leave the encampment or be suspended from the university. What is going on here? We're watching the University of Texas. We're watching Northwestern University. We're watching UCLA. We're watching hundreds of universities around the country. And we all have our eyes on Milwaukee in July, where the RNC will be meeting, and Chicago. What is going to happen here in August of 2024? Will it be a repeat of 1968? Many people hope not, but many people who saw this before said, watch it. We're heading in that direction. But we've had yet something else. You know, my AM 950 audience, and I send you so much love, and I want you to stay right there on the Santita Jackson Show YouTube channel. Morning Stars, I'm going to be with you today. I'm going to be with you. I'm going to be with you. Click and click that bell so that you can get notified. But I need you to like and subscribe. And Morning Stars, pass the show on to everybody. Pass the show on to everybody, at least one person, and on the Santita Jackson Infants Facebook page. Let's talk about Dexter Reed. We have talked about this case several times on this show, but you can't talk about it enough. Of course, AM 950, you know what happened with George Floyd. He sparked a worldwide protest and a call for the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act. We don't have that yet. But that having been said, what we have seen are studies that show that police violence towards citizens have risen since George Floyd's killing. What's going on? How is it that Dexter Reed was shot at 96 times in 41 seconds? What's happening with the police? What is happening? What is happening? We got to talk about this with this wonderful young lawyer who we have known for a very, very long time. I must admit, I am biased because he's a brilliant young lawyer. He indeed, my father considers him to be one of his sons-in-law. You know, he's got sons in different professions, but he has been watching him grow, and we have been so proud of him as he has taken on. Really, he uses the law to seek justice for the most vulnerable among us. And I'm so happy to have you on this show, Andrew Stroth. Excuse me, Attorney Stroth.
Thanks, Santita. Thanks so much for having me on your show today. I really appreciate
You are the lawyer for Dexter Reed's family.
it. Yes.
Okay, tell us, for those of us who are, for the uninitiated, what happened? Were the police allowed to stay on the case? How do you get shot at 96 times in 41 seconds? I know
So
a lot of
yeah, it's so first of all, I want to say, Santita, we're standing on your father's shoulders, and his work in civil rights has allowed me, quite honestly, to be in the position that I'm in today. So thank you, and thank him and your family. On March 21st at around 6 p.m., 5 plainclothes police officers jumped out of an unmarked vehicle on the west side of Chicago and curbed and pulled over Dexter Reed. So without cause, without provocation, without reasonable suspicion, basically pulled over this brother for driving while black. They said he wasn't wearing a seatbelt, yet they admitted in the interviews that there was tints on his window, so they couldn't have seen whether or not he was wearing a seatbelt. So it was a pretextual stop. And then literally within 41 seconds, there were over 90 shots fired by the officers. And then you see Dexter Reed dying, slumped against his vehicle, and the officer shot him 3 more times. Last week, it was so outrageous. When the video was released, the world saw the tragic, unjustified killing of Dexter Reed, 26 years old. What we did is last week, Thursday, we filed a federal civil rights lawsuit, a 17-count, 81-page lawsuit against the city of Chicago and the officers who killed Dexter Reed. And let's be clear, this isn't about a kid in a car shooting at the police. This is about a racist, pretextual, unconstitutional stop of a black man on the west side of Chicago. And Santita, what you and the listeners and watchers, viewers should know is in the consent decree, they talked about these type of tactical units. In the Department of Justice 2017 report, it talks about these tactical rogue units. So this is a clear pattern and practice in the city of Chicago. And what we're asking Mayor Brandon Johnson, we're asking mayors across the country to be mindful and not utilize these tactical units. Because what happened in Dexter Reed's case, how do you tell his mama, Nicole Banks, that her son is no longer here because he was pulled over for not having a seatbelt? It doesn't make sense. And we're committed. My legal team is Action Law Group, Northwestern University School of Law Legal Clinic, and then another partner of mine, Stephen Hart. We have a coalition of lawyers working on behalf of this families and quite frankly, families across the country to advance justice.
The windows in his car were darkened.
Yes.
It appeared from the body cam footage that we've seen. How did they know he wasn't wearing a seatbelt, Attorney Stroth?
They didn't know because they made it up. It was a pretextual stop. And they've been doing that. The same officers that pulled over Dexter Reed without cause or provocation have 41 complaints against them since 2019. Another victim told us about how he was stopped for not wearing a seatbelt. They don't know if he had a seatbelt on or if he didn't. They stopped him because he was driving while black on the west side of Chicago.
Okay, so how many officers were involved, and are they still on the beat? Have they been suspended with pay, without pay? How does this work?
The officers are on paid leave for 30 days. That's what our understanding is. We are also, in addition to the Civilian Office of Police Accountability that's doing their investigation, we are asking Kim Fox, who is our state's attorney, to advance her investigation because we think the evidence will show that there should be some criminal charges in this case, especially as it relates to when Dexter is outside of his car, unarmed, dying, and shot an additional 3 times. And here's the thing, Santita, think about this. 41 seconds, 96 shots, other neighbors, community members, police. If you watch the video, it was literally like watching a Call of Duty video game. And the officers are all young officers. I think the shooting officer was 23, 25 years old.
Wait. What?
Young officers. So Superintendent Snelling, the Chicago police superintendent, you've got TAC officers with limited training doing these pretextual and, from my perspective, racist stops.
Well, limited training and no experience. How much
experience
you have at anything at 23, 24, or 25? We have been that.
Yes.
That you are still in training. If you are in law school, med school, any job you get at that age, you're still apprenticing, even if you're making a full salary.
Yes.
People don't give you the big case. You know that, unless someone is sitting on top of your shoulder. So I want to know, how are they being assigned? I mean, the cars were unmarked, I understand, yes?
Yeah, so if you look at the video...
How did they know anything?
Dexter Reed could have easily thought he was being carjacked. You got 5 people, 4 men and 1 woman, jump out of the car, baseball hats, hoodies, no markings of police. Not once did they announce their office. Without cause or provocation, 96 shots, 41 seconds. And if you got a city, Santita, you know, the city of Chicago supposedly is trying to build trust since Laquan McDonald, since George Floyd, since Tyree Nichols. And then what do we have? March 21st, without any reasonable suspicion, pull over a 26-year-old black man and he ends up dead.
Explain to me, what is the process? Who's culpable? Because with all of those shots, when I saw the footage, I was struck by the fact that it was in the middle of a neighborhood.
Yes.
Bullets don't have names, and the trajectories really don't know where they're going. It could have gone in any of those bullets, any 96 of those, or whatever, 90 plus bullets could have gone into homes.
One
Somebody,
officer reloaded 3 times.
how does that happen?
Well, it shouldn't have happened, and it was in a neighborhood, and to me, it's yet another tragedy. And people, there's no justice, right? Yes, we filed a federal lawsuit. Yes, we think hopefully the state's attorney will charge. Yes, we hope COPA does a full investigation, but there's no justice when Nicole Banks doesn't have her son, when Dexter Banks Sr. doesn't have his son, when Portia doesn't have her brother, and Julius doesn't have her brother. So to me, how do we work with Mayor Brandon Johnson? How do we work with mayors across the country so there's not another Dexter Reed? What have we learned since Laquan McDonald? Apparently nothing. So we want to work with the police and we want to work with the mayor, but you having 25-year-old officers in unmarked cars driving around and terrorizing black folks on the south and west side is not an avenue to build trust.
What can the mayor do?
The mayor can enforce the federal consent decree. They've spent millions of dollars. There's an outline of what should happen as it relates to our police department and recommendations. The city of Chicago is less than 6% compliant. And I know Attorney Linda Bernard is on. So
No. She's waiting. She's waiting for you because I know that your time with us is limited today. I know she works with the police in Detroit, but we need to hear as much about this case from you as we possibly can. She wanted to hear you because of what work that she's doing in Detroit, and because she's won cases. Before the state Supreme Court. I'm wondering, do you take this to the state Supreme Court?
I think here's what needs to happen. We need to follow the tenets of the consent decree. The city of Chicago is less than 6% compliant, and they need to, the fifth floor, the mayor's office needs to be engaged. You can't have the Chicago police managing the consent decree. So we have basically 5 asks of this mayor. We want to disband these tactical units on the south and west sides. You can't have tactical units doing traffic stops. That's not the use of tactical units. We think the officers should be immediately stripped of their police powers. Their gun and badge should be suspended for the moment. We want the COPA to provide the full investigation of how these officers have failed to follow protocol and procedures. We are asking State's Attorney Kim Foxx to swiftly advance her investigation and make the appropriate charging decision. And there's also legislation in Springfield pending that needs to be advanced as it relates to keeping discipline around officers transparent and public. So that's what our asks are. Like, listen, we file federal lawsuits every month, but we can't bring Dexter Reed back. How do we protect other black and brown families in our communities? And we're pro-police. We support the police. We just support when they violate people's rights.
Well, I mean, and I think it's important for you to restate that we do support the police.
Yes.
When we look, these people run into the firemen and firewomen. They run into trouble when we're trying to run away from it. When there's a problem, we call them. So I'm not trying to eliminate you.
Yes.
And even when you call for, I say, when you're calling for the defunding of the police, it's not that you don't want them to have money. I want you to have assistance. Sometimes you need a psychiatrist or a psychologist on call, a social worker, in a domestic dispute.
Yes.
That's your strong suit.
You can't let police serve as first responders for everything. Mm-hmm. And I got to tell you, I am for investing in police, not defunding the police.
That's
and
right.
We put police in tough positions, but the police need to be recruited. People talk about training. Training is important, but first you got to recruit the right people to be police officers. Then you got to train those police officers, and then you got to give them the resources to be successful. This should have never happened because Dexter Reed should have never been pulled over by the police.
What is next? Because after 30 days paid suspension, do they come back into that neighborhood?
It depends on what the police decide what to do. I think while the investigation is pending, they'll probably be placed on desk duty, but still paid. Our federal civil suit will advance through the courts and we'll get discovery. The other thing, Santita, that I want to make clear for the record is no one knows who shot or what shot because the ballistic, like people are saying Dexter Reed shot. Well, we don't really know. We don't have the ballistics from the Illinois State Police. And until we get all of that evidence, we don't really know. But what we do know is 96 rounds were fired by the police. What we do know is an officer shot 3 bullets into Dexter while he was lying dead or dying against his car. What we do know is the cops didn't have reasonable suspicion to pull over Dexter Reed. And what we do know is you have the city of Chicago and other cities and urban markets across the country that continue to terrorize Black folks. And to me, we're committed to advancing change because I'm tired. Every week I'm with mamas whose sons or daughters have been killed, unjustifiably killed by the police. And there's no justice. We just got to work together with the police and with the mayor and with the community to advance real change, which is what your father has been working on for the past 60 years of his life. And so we have to commit to the change or more Black lives are going to be lost.
Well, even in our homes. And I think that is what is so frightening. Now you don't feel safe in the street. You don't feel safe in your home. You don't feel safe anywhere. And so my question to you is exactly what, do you go for a settlement or do you go for a trial?
Well, you go for reform. You go for reform. I mean, listen, I represent the family of Isaac Goodloe, shot and killed in the sanctity of the bedroom of his own home by Carroll Stream police officers. How can you be killed in your home unarmed in your bedroom by the police in 2024? So what we use these lawsuits for are to effectuate real change, because it's not about money. Man, you got to hit people financially, of course, but we file these lawsuits to advance fundamental systemic change. And it's good to see Reverend Jeanette Wilson joining us as well. But we're focused on change for Black people in Chicago, in Minneapolis, and all across the country.
Well, indeed, how can people from Minneapolis get in touch with you and across the country? Because we're hearing from people all around.
They can just go to Action Injury Law Group. We're at actioninjurylawgroup.com. And then we also have a nonprofit called the Truth, Hope, and Justice Initiative. And that's mothers from across the country that have shared their stories who've lost loved ones to police violence. We want to file lawsuits. We want to leverage the community. We want to leverage social media and tell these stories so that, Dexter Reed's legacy in Chicago will be advancing the consent decree and saving other lives.
Well, you did make note of the fact that Attorney Linda Bernard, we were getting some feedback from her. I don't know why, but very quickly, Attorney Bernard, because you work with the police in Detroit, you have worked in the mayor's office in Detroit. You have won cases before the Supreme Court in Detroit. So she has a global set of experiences. Very quickly, because the counselor has to leave us like in a minute.
Very, very quickly. First of all, I'm an elected police commissioner in Detroit. Police officers are recruited here at the age of 18. You can be a full-fledged officer, weapons, all that, at 18, and you go through like 6 months of training. I'm sure the same is probably true in Chicago. So they're not mature. Many of them are not mature people. But beyond that, we had the same problem in Detroit. We were in a consent decree for 11 years with the federal government. We had an operation here called Stress, which was stop the robberies, enjoy safe streets. In like 8 months or whatever, and during the time they were in office, 23 people were killed, young Black men, all of them. We disbanded Stress, as you should disband these tactical units immediately in Chicago, because they act and behave like thugs, quite frankly. That's what they do. They bum rush people. They come in. They do these things. We eliminated Stress in Detroit. We still have tactical units, but they're under very, very strict control. What was most concerning to me about Mr. Reed was that there was this, in my opinion, a rush to judgment regarding the case. I.e., they said he had a gun. Well, were his fingerprints on the gun? Was there gun residue on his fingertips, as you pointed out earlier? What's the status of the investigation? Were the shell casings that were in the car from that gun, or were they just thrown in there? One of the things that Stress did in Detroit was they would plant weapons and plant evidence and so forth. So, so it made it appear that the person was guilty. But I want to make one point. Andrew, before you leave in particular.
Sure.
There's a case that's pending. I don't know if you saw it online about a DA in Webster, New York. She was the district attorney. You must watch this. More than 1.5 million people have viewed it. A white female. To show you the essence of white privilege, they come behind her. She's going 55 in a 30-mile-an-hour zone. She ignores the police, the sirens and everything.
Mhm.
On her cell phone the whole time to her house, pulls into her garage. At no point when she gets out, she's really telling the police officers off, telling them what she's not going to do. This goes on. I can't believe it. She handles her purse. She reaches back in her car.
Sure.
I mean, it's unbelievable.
The latitude that other people are given, and I think this case, while tragic, it is instructive, and we're going to be following it. We need to get you back on, Attorney Stroth, so that we can pursue this case and the Carol Stream case. These are cases that are happening all over the country. We're going to connect you to Attorney Bernard because there's a lot of work for you to do, unfortunately.
Well, we need the mayor of Chicago and the mayors of these other cities to commit to the reform in a meaningful sort of way. Imagine if it was your brother or my brother or your son or my son. I mean, these are people's lives that are shattered forever, which is why I'm so committed to this work. So I appreciate you having me on today, and I appreciate Rainbow Push.
Well, we appreciate you, and just know that anytime that you need to speak with us, let us know. And, let's figure out what we can do to help push our mayor. We elected him on reform, and we know that's something that he wants to do. But it's like FDR had a conversation with A. Philip Randolph, who was saying, look, we don't want to go to this Second World War. We're getting lynched all over the place. He said, you're right. That economically we're being squeezed. All of these things that Tulsa has already happened. He said, you're absolutely right. But we need you. And what you need to do is go out in these streets and make me do it.
Yeah.
Start marching, and that's what we're gonna have. We're gonna have to do all of that, but you have to press.
Yes,
we have to press. But you're one of the most brilliant lawyers on the scene today. We're so grateful, and we know that the Reeds they're blessed to have you. I'm just sorry that they need you.
Thank you so much.
God bless you and your family.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. Oh, Attorney Reverend Jeanette Wilson, Cameron Barnes, National Youth Director for Rainbow Push. Again, Attorney Commissioner Linda Bernard. Well, let me just start with you, Attorney Bernard. What did you hear from Attorney Stroth?
Well, first of all, I was very impressed by his presentation and also by his commitment. But I don't think he's pressing hard enough to get the reform. You've got 22,000 officers in Chicago, and you have a big civilian investigation unit which investigates citizen complaints. Your department, COPA, is remarkable in many, many respects and ahead of Detroit in many ways, at least in my opinion. But in reality, what I saw from the mayor was very lackluster and did not demonstrate the commitment that I would expect to hear from him, and particularly as an African American person. I'm not impressed by this investigation. And in answer to your question, what happens in 30 days? Those officers will be continued on administrative leave with pay. They violated numerous policies that are standard police policies. I doubt some of them may be held accountable. Most of them will not. But the woman who provoked the entire thing, that female officer, she had no right to hold her gun on him. She had no right to approach him that way, not to identify herself, not to identify that she was a police officer, even why he was stopped. This was an ambush, in my opinion, and a bullying, if you will, by the police department. I can't even tell you how many policies they violated, because I know your policies are very similar to ours. All police department policies are similar. On stop and frisk, on stops, what it takes, probable cause, reasonable suspicion. Most of they're like standard policies almost now across the country, but at least in major urban areas. But what happened in this case was unbelievable. And then to shoot him 3 times while he's on the ground, they are all accessories to murder, period. And because the department has a duty to try to de-escalate situations. They started with escalation with the gun pointed at his head. She approached his car with a gun. This is unbelievable, particularly in this day and age. She was the main, if you, to me anyway, proactive person that started this whole thing. Her whole demeanor, her whole put down your window, do this, shouting these commands at him. He didn't even know she was a cop.
You don't know who should. I mean, well, stay right there, Attorney. Excuse me, Commissioner Bernard. I mean, and this is someone who, of course, you know, we all know, Reverend. We know Attorney Linda Bernard because she's been with Operation Breadbasket, Operation Push, Rainbow Push, the campaigns. we've been with Linda Bernard for decades, and beyond her activism and being the first African American to get a master's in law from the University of Pennsylvania Law School, she's taken all of that pedigree and she's come back home to Detroit. She worked with Coleman Young. So she's worked in a mayoral administration, Reverend Wilson. She has argued these cases before the Supreme Court. She's been a commissioner. She is a commissioner with the police department. All of that. I want to know, what are we missing here, Reverend Wilson? I mean, because what are we supposed to do? Because I have to tell you, I'm trying to figure out 96 shots in 41 seconds. Someone rolls up on you. You have all these cars roll up on you in the middle of a neighborhood, Reverend Wilson. That is the most frightening thing in the world. What would you do in that situation, Reverend Wilson?
You try to run, but you couldn't because they blocked his car. If an unmarked car pulls in front of you and then five people get out, they're not uniformed officers, and start making demands on you, one's on one side of the car, another one's on the other side of the car, all he is in a state of fear, and you get in different commands, roll your window down, get out the car, all kinds of craziness. And there's no evidence that he shot first. They keep saying that, but there's no proof yet because, as Attorney Bernard has said, they didn't even, they have not finished and released the toxicology reports. They have released the ballistic reports. Gunpowder residue would be on his hand and on his clothes. That's the first thing they should have looked for if he shot a gun at all.
Correct.
And every time I've asked somebody about it, they said, well, we don't have that information yet, because they've been trying to fashion a story that makes sense. These tag teams need to be shut down.
Well, hold on one moment. But given your experience as an attorney, would they be among the pieces of evidence that they would collect first? Gun residue?
In the Black community, and Attorney Bernard knows this, I practice criminal law. You have to force them to release information and to do their job. Many lawyers don't even question toxicology reports. They just say, we have a toxicology report which shows drugs. You have to put the toxicologist on the stand, the person that was on the scene, put the evidence technician on the stand when you go to court. The other thing is, we're under federal consent decree that we have not complied with. It says there are three things that the Chicago Police Department should have done. That is, have a policy about escalating on the scene. When do you de-escalate it? You have to have a policy about that. Our police department says we have a policy. Second thing you have to do is provide training of police officers. It's no evidence, particularly in this case with that young new officer on a TAC team. I don't know how he got assigned, because I asked the superintendent, how do you assign a new officer to a tactical team? He's too young, he's inexperienced, and he's probably going to be more fearful in a crisis than a veteran cop would be. Secondly, when did you train him? How did you teach him about de-escalating? Because he shot 51 shots. He changed his clip 3 times. So,
I mean, but Reverend Wilson, on one person.
On one person, and he doesn't know you're a cop. Wow. The other thing is, we're under federal consent decree.
What is it? What is the consent decree?
the federal consent decree says that we have demonstrated a pattern and practice of escalating on the street. We have a pattern and practice of unreasonable and unlawful stops of African American males on the streets of Chicago. And they got data to prove that there's a disproportionate number of people in the African American community, Black males, who are stopped for no particular illegal reason. This man, according to what they said, was a traffic stop. TAC teams don't do traffic stops.
Correct.
That's the first thing. A TAC team is assigned for drugs. They're assigned to deal with some kind of murder investigation, some constant violence in an area, and they're looking for certain kind of people. They have a specific duty, and it is not traffic, routine traffic. They are not on the street routine people. That's why they dress in undercover. They're in an unmarked car. You're not even supposed to know who they are. They're used sometimes to investigate organized crime in a particular area. There was no reason that we know of for them to stop him in the first place and to block his forward movement. So I think we must I'm drafting a letter to Kristen Clark, the U.S. Attorney General for civil rights. She has to come back as our former U.S. Attorney came to Chicago and did the patterns and practices investigation, issued the consent decree, filed it in federal court. We have not complied. We're not 6% compliant with the consent decree.
How does this fit under the umbrella of civil rights?
Well, first of all, every citizen has a right to not have their personal safety, individual presence violated on the street without cause. And that's why you have to question, was this stop reasonable? No. Was this stop lawful? No. Based on what they said, their reason for stopping him was a seatbelt violation. They couldn't see the seatbelt the way they were
darkened windows. I'm like, what?
Tinted windows, and they were not beside him. They were in front of him. They pulled in front of his car. When did you see when did you look in the window?
But why would 4 or 5 cars stop on
five police officers in one car? They called them the jump out squad or something.
Well, Cameron Barnes, National Youth Director. I'll be right there, Attorney Linda Bernard. And we have got Jasmine Smith, who's joining us from the Chicago Alliance Against Racist and Political Repression. Of course, we have Frank Chapman on, one of the icons of our struggle last week. I'm so glad that she'll be joining us very shortly. But Cameron Barnes, as the National Youth Director of the Rainbow, but also as a young man, I can't help but think about my nephew Noah. My brother, 2 of my brothers one lives across the street. Congressman Jackson lives across the street from our parents. Yusef lives literally 1, 2, 3 houses down and just around the corner. So and I live 5 minutes away. We're all in this. He lives around the corner. We're all literally in the same neighborhood. And it's a nice, stable neighborhood. And he was coming from his Uncle Yusef's house, playing with his cousins. This was just before he went to college. He's a tall, lanky kid. He reminded me of Trayvon Martin. And I mean, just in so many ways. And he comes around, and they have that. You all have that kind of almost clumsy gait that you have, which becomes 6 feet overnight. And he saw us, and he said with his changing voice, Grandma, I'm Santita. And he starts running down the street. And I ran into the street and I screamed, stop. It was my first reaction. And I almost started to cry because I didn't know with a young Black boy running down the street what could happen to him. I mean, that's where my head is now. This is like 5 years ago. I'm like, whoa, baby, don't ever do that. Go slow. And you give your children as many warnings as you can, but none of them work. You comply, you die. I mean, what? Dexter Reed, what is your takeaway? Because you're talking to young people. And we're in an election season. You're telling them the vote is going to make a difference. And blah, blah, blah. And then this, and when I can't get the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act, come on, Cameron, what are you hearing?
Absolutely. I'm so glad that we are using this platform to talk about the facts. And the fact is that the evidence have not yet shown that Dexter Reed Jr. did indeed shoot first. Can I tell you that there are young people who have become, brainwashed has a negative connotation to it, but who have become even institutionalized, for lack of a better term, in this day and age that, when this happens, first of all, it's commonplace. That's one thing that is already plaguing our community. But the other thing is, we heard that he shot first. And that is used now as a justification for a 96 shots in 41 seconds in execution style, if you will. And I want our young people who are really getting their information from social media. Ms. Jackson, you know how much we've talked about how important it is to really read and get this information and understand from what angle that you're coming from, because I'm concerned that our young people are not asking the correct questions first. Why was he stopped in the first place? Not looking at the chronological order of events that let you know that had not an unlawful stop happened in the first place by a tactical team that should not have been doing such, had that never happened, we would have never had to have a young black man who, by the way, Dexter Reed is 26-year-old, was 26 years old as a black man in Chicago, and I am 26 years old as a black man in Chicago, and therefore there is nothing but a name change that makes me different from him. But for my name being Cameron Barnes and his name being Dexter Reed, we're the same person in Chicago. And so our young people are not asking the right kind of question to understand that just because police are doing what they're doing does not mean that they're always justified. We've seen this too many times. We already understand that they were not justified in the case of Tyree Nichols. They were not justified in the case of Botham Jean. He was not justified in the case of Breonna Taylor. It was not justified.
One moment, because you're bringing up something, and I would like you to respond to this, because I think you're making a brilliant point. I don't want you to run past it. Our young people are assuming, they're believing the corporate line that they're guilty.
Yes.
And that they don't, and maybe they don't have many rights.
And
they're listening to corporate media. I mean, now, mind you, I grew up in the 70s and 80s. I met Fred Hampton many times. So I was like in kindergarten or so when he was killed. So it was stunning, because I lived through a period that, when I think about it, it was quite traumatizing. Or so many of my parents' friends who I knew were getting killed, they were dying. They weren't dying, they were getting killed. And I think about, but the question was, the police need to prove that they're innocent. Particularly after we found out that Fred Hampton, that they got on the news and they lied on him. They said that he and Mark Clark were in a shootout. It was attorney G. Flint Taylor who went to the apartment and saw that all the bullets were going in. Oh my gosh, what has happened with this generation, where they're like, well, now what did you do?
See, attorney Sierra Norris, who was with us this past Saturday at the Saturday Morning Forum, mentioned a line that I thought was very interesting, that the police department seemed to cloak themselves in the chaos that they cause. And by that she simply means that the chaos caused, as you mentioned, look at the parallel from when Fred Hampton was killed, and the first thing that came out was a lie. Here we have COPA, who has already said that they do not believe the reason that was given to them for this stop, which was this alleged seatbelt violation in a tinted window. COPA itself has already said, not without us in the street making any action, COPA already said, this does not make sense. This does not make any kind of factual agreement here, and we do not believe that that is the case. Again, cloaking themselves, the police department, in the chaos for which they have caused, because then when we begin to ask the questions, why was he stopped in the first place? Now, as Attorney Wilson has mentioned, oh, well, we've not gotten the ballistic report. We've not gotten the investigation. We've not gotten all of these other things. And that's used to say we can't answer your question. So now we have to hide behind the chaos that we caused in the first place by lying to say, oh, this tactical unit pulled him over for a seatbelt violation.
I'd like to make one quick point about this. First of all, police officers are governed by the policies that are created by COPA and by the mayor's office as well. In this instance, I can guarantee you that your policy says what ours says in Detroit, and that is you cannot turn off your body cam when you are engaged with a citizen. The woman who initiated this whole contact, who was so brash and bullying of him when he, roll down your windows and pointing a gun at him, she had further, after they started shooting, instructed all the officers to turn off their cameras. In Michigan and in Detroit, that would make all of them culpable at that time, because it means at that point there's a conspiracy and they're covering up evidence. It's an intent to cover up evidence. And
the other thing, you're absolutely right.
And the other thing I want to note is that the officer whose hand was shot, we don't know if that was shot by your Dexter read,
friendly fire,
but through friendly fire. In Detroit, and when we have those mass operations like that, we have like 4 or 5 officers that can be shot by friendly fire. These officers are young, they're inexperienced. If you breathe hard, they're ready to shoot, quite frankly.
And the thing is, they have automatic weapons, and they continue to reload them, which is clear excessive force.
And in this instance, they termed this young man, like the other young men who've been in I call it Swiss cheese. They have so many holes in them that they bleed out instantly. There's no need to take them anywhere. And the final point I want to make is what I call the 11th commandment with respect to the police, and that is that thou shalt not indict or talk about another police officer.
That's right.
Is the code of blue is strong.
It's the blue code.
Well, hold on. Let me bring on Jasmine Smith from the Chicago Alliance Against Racist and Political Repression. Jasmine, I need you. Are you on mic, Jasmine?
Yes, I unmuted, but I can't see myself. But can you guys see me?
No, we can't, but we can hear you, and that is more than enough right now. What do you make of this case? You're on with Cameron Barnes, Minister Cameron Barnes, who's the National Youth Director for Rainbow Push, Attorney General Bernard, Commissioner Bernard with the police in Detroit, but she has been a civil rights activist for many, many years now. We can see you, Jasmine, and Reverend Jeanette Wilson, as you know, from Rainbow Push. I've only got about 10 minutes left, but I certainly want to hear from you as much as we can, because I think I saw you in the background with Frank Chapman last week.
I was, and I'm sorry. So what was your direct question?
My direct question is, where are we with this case? It seems that the police are on 30 days paid leave. Is that enough? Do we have a settlement? Do we have a trial? What do you think is the best route to work through this? Because I don't know. Can you ever get justice for the Reed family? No, you can't.
Because we can't get them back.
You can't get him back.
I 100% agree with that. And I feel like where we at now, I think that it's time for another, it's past overdue time for another uprising for the Black people and our young people getting killed by the police not being held accountable, Black people being the main target of being imprisoned in them godforsaken slave ships. I feel like a lot of our people are distracted, and they purposely are being distracting that comes to our youth as well. They care more about what's going on social media and listening to what the next person say, other than getting that constructive direction and true education of what we need to be out here doing, fighting for our justice, fighting for our rights. A lot of people touched on it, even the lawyer Sierra, he spoke on these laws. There's a lot of laws that's been put in place that's against us. The laws was never put in place to help us. The laws been put in place to be against us and to help the offenders, the true offenders, and that's the officers. Like right now, they in a process what they always put officers and detectives through, which is a suspension. Then after the suspension, they able to come back to work upon the investigation. But regular civilians like ourselves, if we was to shoot or kill at one of each other, or even to kill them, we'll be immediately locked up. We'll be immediately investigated. They will have to get our statements within 24 hours, and we'll be sitting in prison awaiting our trial and awaiting the investigations. And I feel like those laws that's protecting them, meaning a contract, is one of the biggest things that we're up against, and that me and my organization personally are about to start trying to tackle and be able to get the powers that be that can sit at the tables with the city lawmakers on a next contract. The next contract is going to be up. We're hoping that we have people and bodies that we trust that can sit at those tables and take out the things that's been protecting them, because without that being taken out of their contract, and without the higher powers that be that can just at a stroke of a pen fire them right now upon they investigation, strip them of them being able to get paid while they being investigated. If these people are not going to step in and help us, what's the next best thing for us to do? We got to show up, we got to show out, and we got to stand united on all forces. I feel like every organization that's out here, grassroots organizations who really have the powers and the means to call on the masses, for all of us to sit at a round table and call on a big meeting so we can strike them where we know we'll get justice and get answers. Like when we sit up here and we come out here and we rally and don't keep it going, they take us as a joke. If once we stop going and they haven't gave us what we demanded, we keep dealing with this. Like everyone keeps saying, Dexter Reed is not the first victim. You still got Michael Wesley that was killed by the police. You got Reginald Clay that was killed by the police. You got Ronald Johnson that was killed by the police. And all of those officers who had something to do with them wrongful killings are still on the force right now. They've been investigated. Some of the cases are still being investigated, but all of these officers are a danger to our communities, and yet they look past that fact. If we are a danger to the community, they put us up. But when officers and detectives are a danger to our communities, they're still able to walk these streets and supposed to be policing the communities when they're not. I just feel like something drastically needs to happen within the Black community, and it's time for us to stand up like once before, like our fallen leaders that was there before. I know we probably don't have an ideal leader right now to lead the masses, but to me personally, we all are leaders within ourselves, and we have to stand up for what's right for our people. Like regardless to one person bringing out the masses, we all can collectively come together and bring out the masses again until we get justice the correct way. And that's
I think that you're right, but be very clear. We've never had an ideal leader. Dr. King was the most hated man in America when he was killed. Mm-hmm. And I promise you, Reverend Jackson will be appreciated when he shuts his eyes, because that is how we do. And it's unfortunate that we do that in real time, and that is what we do. Mm-hmm. And I guess my question in these last 4 or 5 minutes we have here is, what is the path forward? Let me start with you, Jasmine, because you came here last, but I know you've got so much to say, and I can't wait to have you back on the show for a longer period. Because we started off the show with the Dexter Reed family lawyer, Andrew Stroth.
Okay.
And so, we wanted to know from him where the case is. What are they doing? But I think, and he feels that we need to be marching too. And while he's litigating, you have to do it. You have to do all of that. What is the next step in about a minute? If I may, Santita, just very quickly. No, hold on. Let me let her. Let me let her, and then I'll come to you. Yeah.
The next 5% of the traffic stops in your city are young Black men. That's a fact.
I got you, but let me get to Jasmine. You're absolutely right.
The next steps is everybody within the means and the reach to call on the masses and to wake and to get our people back woken up where we can get in those streets and march and shut stuff down until they give us the proper justice that we deserve. Meaning, like, my organization is reaching out to many, Chicago Alliance is reaching out to many of our allies. spoke with, Operation Push, Cameron Barnes and all of them that's organized and like how we move forward. And it starts with that. All of us with the means and the powers and the people, like politically, we got people that's in power, and we need them and to hold them accountable to start pushing what we need them to do and to change those laws in Springfield and in the White House. And if they can't move swiftly like they should have been moving, again, it's time for all of us to sit at a round table, the leaders and the organizations that's really about making the change, to sit down, have a meeting, to call on and do a big outreach. It's time to shut the streets down again. That's the only way they go hear us. And it's unfortunate, like that's what happened from the beginning of our time. And to get anything changed, to get anything in place, what did our leaders have to do? Have to shut streets down, no business as usual, and tell y'all do right by the Black people. This can't keep going on, because it happened to our loved ones. It can happen to their loved ones. It can happen to y'all loved ones. Like, everybody have to look at it like that. It wasn't you today, but it could be you tomorrow. Like, everybody got kids. Y'all kids are not exempt, and they need to take that as a serious matter. Like, y'all not going to continue to go on like this for the generations to come. I refuse to sit back and let it happen. That's why I'm in the office like 24 hours a day, basically, to figure out how we really come together and really can wake up our people, because I feel like what they did, Santita, is put that narrative out that he shot first. And by them putting that narrative out, that's what stopped the uprising right now. But it ain't gonna stop it for coming, because it's gonna come again. But them doing that was a distraction to the people. Like, oh, he like what Reverend Dr. Jeanette said. Oh, he shot first. That's what everybody think, but nobody actually seen that on the camera. So they knew what they was doing. It's always a political game in the fight when it comes to what they air out on they platforms. And that's why I'm thankful for platforms like this and the people to really pay attention to us, because don't believe everything that the news put out, because it ain't always true. And
well, I will tell you this, Jasmine Smith. I mean, as we're going to have to leave, I almost have a heart out just in about 30 seconds. Something has happened with this generation that we're going to have to change. Because when I was a little girl, when they killed Fred Hampton, I was about 5 or 6. We did not believe the police. And G. Flint Taylor, his lawyer, went over to his apartment the next morning. I mean, Fred Hampton's blood was still on the floor, because we did not believe them. There's been a shift that's happened, maybe because we think we're free now, because we've got the good jobs and we don't have the whites only fountains and restrooms and all that. Maybe we are under the mistaken impression,
well, I think
that the struggle does not continue, and it absolutely has to. Dr. King ran his race. Reverend has run his. Now we've got to run ours. It's not that they were not successful; they were. But the problem is so deeply embedded that we have work to do. Well, Reverend Wilson, I've got a hard 30 seconds. 30
seconds. What I would say to Jasmine and other young people in Cameron, we used to convene around these issues, and everybody has assignment. There's something lawyers can do. There's something legislators can do. We have to contact the city council. They can pass an ordinance that will reform certain actions by the police. There's something that
activists can do.
And then we talk about the street heat. There are different levels of that, and we have to organize that. When we shut down Chicago Fest, lawyers were in the courtroom. We had people marching every day on the street. So you have to have the strategies, and you also you plan it together. And I think
that's right.
We want to thank you for joining us this Saturday. It was a powerful presence by a coalition of organizations.
That's right.
Will grow stronger. And we have to meet first and plan our actions and plan our strategy.
And understand and appreciate everybody's got a role, and let us support each other in these roles. Because in Chicago Fest, which led to Harold Washington running reluctantly, which led to Reverend Jackson being pushed into a people's draft for the presidency, that was also an economic boycott.
Right.
Chicago Fest lost all of their money because we would not go. It became, you as a Black person and as people who sympathize with us.
We need that struggle.
Well, it's here. We just have to work to make that happen.
Yeah.
activist Jasmine Smith. I don't know what God's going to do with you. Maybe I spoke something out there. Attorney Linda Bernard, Minister Cameron Barnes, Reverend Dr. Jeanette Wilson. I'm sending you all so much love. Thank you for being with us. Stick around for the second hour of the Santita Jackson Show because we're talking about the campus protest. What's happening? People are trying to sabotage them, but people are not falling for it. And that's right. But Columbia University has said that they will suspend everyone who's still in the encampments today. Oh, they're playing hardball, but we got to mix it up too. Come on now, nonviolent resistance. Oh, there's nothing like these cameras being trained on people who are fighting back by not punching back.
Mm-hmm.
Come on now. Dr. King knew what was up, and so did Gandhi. And we do too. Back with more of the Santita Jackson Show in just a few minutes. God bless.